Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Mom Squad. This is a show where we talk all things parenting, and it's the time of year many of us get spring fever. We long for those toes in the sand, maybe reading a book by the water, and of course, just warmth. But whether you've already booked that spring break or you're thinking about that summer vacation, you might also be thinking, how can I stay within budget? Or another big question overall that we're going to be asking, can I even afford it? So in a few minutes, we are going to talk to financial planner Elizabeth Scheiderer with Sequoia Financial Group about how to save money and how to approach it. But first, let me introduce my co-host today, Danielle Wiggins. And Danielle, you and I sit across from each other at our desks, and we've talked a lot about vacations and how to approach it with the family, because you had a situation pop up that you struggled with. And this is why I want to bring Danielle in, because I know that we've all faced the same questions.
It was such a struggle, but first I have to say this is a first world problem. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, in perspective, there are so many people out there like, I'm just trying to get food on the table, and you all are talking about vacation. So I do understand we're in a great spot. But so my brother, I think I've said this on former Mom Squads, is that my brother is renewing his vows with his lovely wife. They've been married for 20 years, and they are pretty well off, and she has expensive taste. Love my sister, love my sister. So I'm like, oh, so we're gonna go to Florida or something? They're like, no, Cabo. And I'm like, Cabo, Mexico. Now, granted, my husband and I, we've never left the country. Oh, wow. And so, that takes, we got to get passports for everybody. And she wanted, that's her niece and nephew, she wanted my children to come. And we thought we could do it. So they sent out the original, payment and how much everything would be. And we're like, oh. So I gave myself, okay, this is the budget that we can afford, that I know even if we put it on a credit card, we can pay it off with interest free and not drown in debt. However, when the travel agent came back with adding the flights on there, the flights were like $4,000 for just the four of us. And we even went down and said, okay, what if we just do 3 days instead of 4? They're all staying 5. And I'm thinking I'm doing great by going shorter days. And then I'm thinking, the price became double what I budgeted for shorter time frame. And I said, and I called my husband, I said, oh, we can't afford this. Yes, thank goodness we have the credit where I could put it on a credit card and pay for it for 5 years or whatnot, but it's really expensive. And so we had to make the really tough decision and sit the kids down and say, I'm sorry, I know we said you can go, but we just can't afford it. And there were tears, and it was hard. And then I think a couple weeks later, my daughter realized, wait a minute, you all are still going. How you guys get to still go? And honestly, if I could, I would say nobody's going, because it was so hurtful to us as parents, because we really wanted them to go, but we just couldn't afford it. And we said, we're not being good and a good example if we buy things that we can't afford.
Right. And this is why I was like, you are going to be perfect for this, because
I also, terrible parent. You kicked your kid off the vacation.
We're going on a vacation, but that's not your approach, and that's not your intention. Obviously, this is a family thing, and how many of us have had those family weddings or something where everybody might be invited, but to get a babysitter to fly the kids or something, it's sort of like you have to come to those hard decisions. Now, when it comes to spring breaks, how many of us get wrapped up in, well, all my friends are going on spring break, and you get those questions of where are you going on spring break? And then you feel nowhere, we're just staycationing. So you don't want to admit oh no, this isn't in our cards. And then you get into a bad financial situation where then you're behind, and maybe then you can't put food on the table. I mean, all of this is emotion. It is. Every time we do these budget stories, we talk about being able to separate yourself from the emotion. And we're going to talk a lot more about that, because I think that being honest with yourselves and with your family, Elizabeth and I talk about that as well as a lot of other things. But let's say you have booked that spring break. You paid for the hotel, the Airbnb, the Vrbo, whatever. You're going, and now you're like, ooh, how can I save money? Well, it's all tough conversations that we need to have with the kids. And Elizabeth Scheiderer had some really great advice. Spring break time, very stressful for a lot of families financially because you know that you're just going to break a few budgets, but we can stick to the budget. And that's why I'm bringing Elizabeth in. Let's start with even just booking that vacation. Where are some ways that we can approach the vacation by saving money?
Yeah, and so stepping back as a family, as a mom, you're trying to plan this vacation, you need to think about what does your family need right now before you can even start to budget. Is this a, hey, we haven't seen grandma since 2019, we all need to go out to California? Or is this a, it's spring break, we're out of school, let's just go blow off some steam and have some fun? So you need to think about the why behind the trip, and then you can be purposeful about your spending.
Yeah, that's great advice too, because I think a lot of people get caught up in, well, all of my friends are gonna, you know, this family's going to Florida and then this family is going to California, and so we need to do something. How do you emotionally detach yourself from that?
Exactly, and especially with the day-to-day of every family's different. Maybe you're in travel sports right now with your kids and you're traveling everywhere every weekend already, or you may have been really just staying at home here the last few years and it's time to go out, or you just now got a job or a promotion and you could work travel into the budget. So it is different for everyone, and recognizing what's best for your families is what's best for your family.
Okay, so if we can emotionally detach and just take a look at our bank accounts, what we're able to spend, how should we look at things like, you know, location and how to book things?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what I've seen a lot of families do is sit back and think about, well, where are some places that maybe I haven't thought about that isn't that key destination? Maybe we don't go to Disney over spring break when everyone is going to Disney.
Yeah.
So, you know, doing a little bit of research, asking around, you know, those family friends at the soccer field, you know, where have you been? The idea of like Aruba has come up a few times versus going to Florida. It's surprisingly inexpensive. So do a little bit of research, ask around, get a feel, and be willing to get creative here.
Yeah. What about thinking about those expenses when we get there too? What else is needed? Like, I mean, I know for us, we're going to a place, we're flying because we hit the pricing just right, but then we're going to need to rent a car.
Yeah.
Like, do we need to think about those? How do you cost compare with those?
Yeah, so when it comes down to flying versus driving, there's quite a few things to think about. Number one, can your family even handle a car ride to Hilton Head, for example, or do you need to fly? But a good rule of thumb is right around, you know, maybe 6 hours, 5 hours of drive time. It is usually better than the airport when it comes down to just getting to the airport, getting through the security with all the car seats and actually getting to the plane, and then the expenses there. So it is really important to think about those sorts of things. And to your point too about getting there and needing a car, the rental cars, right? That's one of those things you can shop. So a lot of rental cars say you can cancel within X amount of days. So you book that first rental car, and then every few days go back and see, hey, did it go down in price a little bit? And maybe you might be able, all right, I got that minivan for $34 a day instead of the original 70 you landed on.
Right, it's being savvy about that. And there was that discussion, especially when gas prices were high, where people were going, well, it's more expensive to drive than it is to fly. What do you think about that? Especially like we're just starting to see gas prices go up again. How do you crunch those numbers as a family?
Yeah, so you want to sit back and really price this flight. So there's a lot of good research tools out there. Even, you know, Google Flights, for example. If your time frame's very flexible, maybe flying is better because you can leave on a Wednesday, come home on a Tuesday. But if you're looking at a Tuesday to Monday trip, you may be driving because of just those are high demand times. So really sit back and think about the actual flights and what those look like. And then when it comes to driving, how many gallons of gas? How are we going to manage? With driving, though, you are able to pack, especially with flying right now. You're paying for every bag, every carry-on.
Yeah.
So really think about that, too. And then even that cooler you might be able to pack and bring with you can save some money.
Yeah, that's true. I want to talk about saving money while on vacation. And right before we started talking, you just said that you did go on a trip. So thinking about this in mind, how can you, once you're at that destination, you've already booked the hotel, so you're spending a ton on a hotel or a house or someplace to stay, you know, whether you decided to fly or drive, the cost of getting there has already incurred. And I know for us, sometimes we think of like, okay, so we're here, how can we not spend copious amounts of money. How do we save while we're on the vacation?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's tough because kids are bored and they're running around like, let's go get ice cream.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, $40 later and a giant lollipop you weren't planning on is coming home with you.
Right.
And so you kind of want to sit back and say, what are we going to do each day? Plan it out and think about where can we save some money, or even empowering the kids heading into this. Like if we want to go to Legoland on Wednesday, well, the 2 months before the trip, we're going to do some chores to earn up for that.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. And two, I think setting that budget even like on a daily has been helpful. Like saying we're going to spend $100 today, whether we do it at breakfast, we do it at dinner, we do it at the Beach Bazaar store, we're going to spend that X amount of dollars, and when it's done, it's done.
How about that with food? Do you think that works with food? I mean, I'm just thinking of like when we did just a one tank trip, we stopped at Starbucks. And all of a sudden, $50 later, because the kids are like, well, I want a cake pop, and I want and so specialty drinks, you know, waters and everything, all of a sudden, we're $50 in on just a pit stop.
Yeah.
So like, I think we need to talk about that too. And obviously, there might be some ways to save with that budget.
Yeah, and that's a great point, is you do end up in those little moments of like, oh my goodness, how did we just spend $50? At least no one's crying, but still we spent $50.
Yeah.
And so even heading into the vacation, setting the mindset with your kids based on their age about, we're gonna have one special vacation thing a day. Right? And maybe we're doing it at dinner because we're getting fancy desserts, or maybe it is the Starbucks trip and everybody's finally going to get something today. But recognizing that vacations are special, and yes, it's a chance to do things we don't normally do, but there is a budget and money is finite, and we have to pick and choose those needs and wants, and getting everybody into it together. It might be a lot of sense like, no, I don't really want that pop right now. I'd rather wait to do something later.
Yeah, and before we were talking about empowering the kids, what are some ways that you can teach kids a lesson about finances and money while you're on vacation? Yeah,
and that's a great question. And I was thinking about that with my kids running around the airport and then at the actual destination. And so we came up with a spending budget where they had X amount of dollars to spend while on the trip. And then, yes, if my daughter wanted to spend it all at the airport, the hard part was we had to say no the rest of the trip, but she recognized that. Or she could say, you know, I want to spend some at this store and some at this store, for example, and really letting them recognize that budgeting is important, and talk about a great place to learn and kind of recognize that.
Yeah. Do you know of any ways, or where would you give advice on like those events, those destination places, like the trips within the trip, you know, like going to a museum or going to an adventure park or something? Like, how do you save on those things?
Yeah, so one of the things is you sit back and you can look at the website ahead of time and see, hey, do they have any packages? What does a membership look like? Like sometimes, especially if you're traveling with a bigger group, kind of looking at that and then setting the expectations that, yes, we're going here, but we're not going to see the 3D movie.
Yeah.
Those sort of things, and really planning it out. And maybe you could say, oh, we have 3 choices. We could ride the ride, 3D movie, or have lunch there. What do you want to do, kids? And then they can help decide.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is I was even thinking past vacations, we as parents stressed out about, okay, well, we need to go to mini golf and then we need to go here and here. And my kids loved, like there was a heated pool in the community and they spent all day there. And I was like, why did I even spend money on mini golf? All they wanted to do was swim in the pool. So I think we don't give our kids enough credit of they're just entertained to be somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, even the rest stop in Florida that has shelves by the parking lot's a nice destination for these kids these days. So,
right.
Yeah, to your point, yeah, they're very just excited to be out of the house. And again, that gets back to the why behind the trip. Yeah. And is it a chance for your kids to grow and think differently and experience new things? And it may not be to come back with the most flashiest, you know, souvenirs, but it's those memories and all that life learning experiences that you get to have together.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I'm bringing you in is also for the hard talk, because you go over family budgets all the time. You help people with their finances all the time. And every once in a while, a big vacation is doable. But the reality is, especially when we're seeing budgets go up and like our grocery bills going up and just regular bills going up, maybe a family vacation isn't doable. How do you come to that reality? Like, what would you say is an indication you should just take a step back and say, no way, we can't do it this year?
Yeah, so that conversation definitely starts with the adults in the household before you even start to consider how do we talk to the kids. And it's coming together and saying, or individually saying, well, where are my priorities? Where am I at with my retirement? I mean, yes, it's great to go to spring break now, but what if you really do want to retire at 65? You need to be thinking ahead. And so it starts with kind of that big picture thinking. And I guess to me, the best rule of thumb is if you're sitting on credit card debt that you're still struggling to get out from under, and we've seen interest rates just go up, up, up on those cards, the last year. To me, that's the first warning sign of not taking the vacation, staying at home, paying off that credit card, so then next year you can go and that vacation isn't going to cost you 19% over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one of those things to me that's one of the bigger red flags. And then the second thing I've been seeing a lot of recently with kind of the older children is the travel sports. And that's just becoming more and more expensive, and it includes travel.
Yeah.
And so changing that mindset of, yes, we're traveling, so you're traveling for sports, but you may not have room in the budget because of that expense.
Yeah. Depending on the age of kids, is that where you also empower them, where you sit down and have that conversation with them of, look at all of our expenses and sorry, we can't do a vacation? Like, how would you talk to maybe some of the older kids about, this is the reality of the situation?
Yeah, and it's going to be dependent upon your kids and how much you want to share, but teaching them that you don't always get everything you want. There's choices in life. It's an important life lesson. And yes, it's a tough one right now, but in the scheme of things, if they remember when I was 15, my family didn't go on a trip, but my neighbors did, but then we got a pool that summer, or then next year we went to Disney, and I mean, so it's kind of thinking about how are we spending money, where are we prioritizing as a family. And then too, if these kids have jobs and they're older, you could say, you know, part of this, if we are going to take a vacation, is you come up with that extra spending money at the Starbucks, for example, those sort of things.
You brought up credit cards, and we've had a couple stories in the news recently about some of those rewards, how credit card companies are paring back on rewards. Like, your dollar doesn't stretch as far to get those miles or to get, you know, airline miles or maybe even money back. But is that still a way, you know, looking a year ahead? Maybe I'm speaking for myself. I feel like my husband's always like, oh, look, I just, you know, I took out the United card because now we can earn miles and then next year go on a trip. Is that a way to save in the future, or do we fall victim to, you know, opening up a new card and now we're running up more debt or something?
Yeah, then that's a great question. And I think it comes down to being purposeful with the cards. I'm a big fan of having at max maybe 4 credit cards, just so you're aware, and you decide which one's the travel rewards card and is it the best. So maybe United's no longer flying to Tampa like they used to, and maybe then you want a Southwest card, for example. Or I've seen a lot of families have success with the credit cards for the hotels, because those can be, you know, just based on a big brand, and there's destinations everywhere you're going. And so it really, with those cards, stick to 3 to 4, utilize the one for the groceries, the one for travel, the one for the cash back, and just stick with that and pay it off every month.
Yeah. All right, so you have 2 kids and you just traveled. So coming fresh off of a vacation, is there anything that you realized about budget, about saving money or where to spend that you can pass along to the rest of us?
Yeah, so you're right. I did just do that. So my best practice would be to pack that backpack. So we flew, and so it was so tough at the airport. I want this gummy thing. I want this. And I was like, and this stuffed animal. Like, no, we have everything in the backpack. And I stepped back and said, we probably saved $50 at the airport both ways.
Oh, wow.
By saying no to the kids by what we packed. Yes, it's on your back and you're schlepping it around while you're trying to wrangle kids running around, but still, it was a great way to save $100. And to me, $100 can go a long ways when you reach that destination for a really fun day.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of this great information is very helpful, very eye-opening, things to think about. It's almost that like, well, duh, why didn't I think of that when it comes to like cooking while you're on the vacation or giving the kids a budget. But I think this all applies to even as we head into the summer months, because kids and I mean adults, we get wrapped up in, it's summer, what can we do? Let's go to this water park, let's go to this you know, amusement park, let's do a car trip. We got to do something because the kids are off, and then you end up just overspending on activities and not being realistic. But I feel like you're doing your kids a disservice by pretending that there's a bottomless pit of money too.
Right. It was interesting because I had a conversation with one of my neighbors, and she was talking about, I remember when we were kids, I never went on vacation.
Right.
And she was taking her kids on a Disney vacation, a Disney cruise. And so I was like, yeah, my family vacation was going to the family reunion every year, wherever the bus took us. So we never went on these extravagant vacations. And so for us, for my family, we do the vacations because my in-laws have a timeshare. So that's how we save a lot of money, is they allow us to use their timeshares. And so that saves us money on lodging, but of course you gotta do the plane and all those different types of things. So in my head, what I told our family is we're gonna do a big vacation one year and then do smaller staycations. So one year we did Disney and it was expensive and I didn't plan well for that. So I ended up paying for that vacation years later. And I'm like, I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah.
So the next year, we're here in Cleveland, Ohio. I decided that, okay, this is all going to be cash. And we like to do things that's educational. So we drove to Cincinnati, which is like 5 hours from here, I think. And we went to Kings Island. We went to the movies. We stayed in a nice, you know, suite type hotel. And the kids loved it, and I wasn't paying for it afterwards. And so that's what we tried to do. Last year we went to Vegas, which was our big vacation. And then unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, my brother's still married, but they want to renew their vows. So I'm like, doggone it, this fell on the cheap vacation year. So, so what we're doing with our kids, I said earlier that we had to tell them, hey, we can't afford all 4 of us to go to Mexico. So we are going to go, and we felt so bad because we knew we could not go and be there for my brother. I'm his only sibling.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, I have to be there and definitely want to take my husband. So what we told the kids is we're going to do another big vacation in 2 years. So that resets, that they can help plan and we can budget all together. But this year we're going to do smaller things like going to Kelly's Island, which is here in Northeast Ohio, and different things that are less expensive. And then we're going to go visit Uncle Tony in Washington, D.C. and go to all of those museums. And it was interesting because my daughter said the other day, after she cried and pitched a fit about not going to Cabo, which was, me and Chris was like, hey, we understand. I can completely understand why you're upset. She says, oh, I'm happy I'm not going to Mexico. I'm glad we're going to D.C. And me and my husband just looked at each other like, where did this come from?
We just drove to DC, and my kids are a little bit on the younger side, and it was one of those like, what's easy, what's drivable, what can we do, you know, free museums, and we got a suite. So it was, because I have 3 kids, so we got a larger hotel room. We ordered pizza, got it to the room. We didn't go out as much. You know, like I had packed some food so we weren't stopping for snacks all the time. So it ended up being just, it was very happy too. Like we just had a happy time going to some free museums. I paid to go to Mount Vernon and see George Washington's home. But you got to think of those like easy drivable. And what you brought up too, when we were kids and when we were younger, I mean, I feel like this is the social media world we live in, where you're seeing all these people post. I've fallen for it, where my friends are posting from Disney, or like somebody I follow on Instagram posts from Disney, and it gets me thinking, oh wait, I haven't gone in a while. Oh, you know what? I need to give my child that. You know, my youngest was only a baby when we went. We need to do. No, we don't need to do that. Like our kids, we didn't grow up to become murderers.
Trip.
We're
fine. We went on one Disney trip. Well, my family went on 2. They left me at home the first time because I was too young. So they say, so I don't even remember. And even we went to Disney, and I think I was like 6 or 7. The only thing I remember is the plane ride and the hotel or the condo that we stayed in. That's all I remember about it. So, you know, one thing that I'm thinking about when it comes to vacations, when it comes to like taking a step back, what I'm learning from my children is it's mostly about the time together. And that is even the past years that we've done. I think vacations are very important. You don't have to do something very extravagant if you can't afford it. If you can, go ahead, do it, honey. You know, if you can afford that. but it's really about that time spent pouring into the relationships with your children, with your spouse or whomever, if you're a single mom. It's just about really making those memories, and it doesn't take a lot of money to do that all the time.
It doesn't. It doesn't. They don't. And I guess when you were really kind of talking about the overall here, they don't know how much things cost. I mean, that's sort of the point, right?
This is sometimes
which is bad, but you know, they don't know how much things cost. This is why you have to involve them in these conversations of teaching them about money, but also, you know, to my kids, a trip to the local amusement park is the same as they love it just as much as when they went to Disney, you know. And so, but teaching them the value of the dollar, but also at the same time teaching them that fun is where you make it.
Right.
You don't have to go a long distance for fun. You can have fun in your backyard. I mean, that's what we did. We got a pool pass every summer, and that was my summer vacation as a kid. We didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, but hopefully, you know, the takeaways here that you're getting from especially Elizabeth's advice and Danielle here is, you know, ways to involve the family in some of those financial decisions, not going into debt and putting yourself in a bad position just so you can say, well,
we did it.
Just so you can post that Instagram photo of you with, you know, everybody does it, where your feet are up and you see water behind it. I mean, are you really going to get into a bad financial situation just so you can impress people?
It's really a hard pill to swallow, to be honest, because there is another family, they have 4 kids, they're taking their entire family, and I'm like, oh, why can't I even take 2? And you feel bad, but you say, you know what? Am I going to, I know myself, and if we're in so much debt that I'm like, oh, we can't pay off, or we're paying all this interest, so it's not only double what I budget, it's triple because of the interest if I'm not going to pay it off in that month. So when I did that, I sort of think to myself, what type of frame of mind am I going to be in a few months after the vacation when those bills start rolling in and I'm all stressed out because of the financial. So I'm just going to say, hey, Mama can't keep up with the Joneses today. This is what we're going to do. This is what we can afford. And I'm sorry. I wish we could. We just can't.
I want everybody to also get in on the conversation because I know that, that Danielle is not alone here. I think we've all felt that way. So we have a Facebook page now for Mom Squad. It's Mom Squad with Maureen Kyle. We have a QR code that we put at the bottom here. So if you've been wondering what that QR code is, if you hold your phone up to it, that's how you join our Facebook page. We want to hear from you. We want to hear feedback on what we're doing. Tell us if you're in the same boat, but also tell us what you'd like us to cover too when it comes to expert advice. That's why we're all doing this. We need the squad. So thank you to Danielle for opening up and sharing. I mean, like I said, this has been a conversation that we've had over our desks.
How terrible of a mom I am.
You're not a terrible mom.
I feel like
we're doing what we can.
That's true.
And thanks to all of you for joining us here on Mom Squad. We'll see you right back here next week.